The other day we discussed this third light of Sasana, namely Lakkhana Pativeda Samadhi, right understanding by penetrating the characteristics. When one listens to this subject from the theoretical aspect, it will be very boring. One will get very bored very soon after listening to this, if it is only from the theoretical aspects. Only with practical experience, one will become clearer. As one sees the characteristics, such as the impermanent nature of things, then one will become convinced, satisfied and delighted. So this nature, this subject, looks easy but difficult, looks shallow but deep, because it is very hard to observe or hard to experience. So when you think normally, in ordinary sense, it looks shallow, but it is, in practice it is deep, though it looks shallow. So it is difficult to understand easily this subject, which looks shallow but deep, and which looks easy but difficult. So only when one is explained, both from the theoretical and practical aspects, verify the theory with the practice, will only be convinced by oneself and satisfied with the subject. So we did not discuss this subject in the beginning of the retreat. At the beginning of the retreat, we only did the exhortations, talked about exhortations, and talked about how to activate mindfulness of every arising object. Just note whatever arises. Be with the moment. Sink into the moment, that sort of thing. Now, the retreat has come into more than 1 month. So by this time, the yogis have experienced and will be able to verify their experience with what they have listened in the talks, so that they can judge to what stage they have reached by themselves. Hence, this subject at this time. So the other day we have been discussing the two things, the light and the darkness. The light or the darkness in terms of the darkness of delusion about the characteristics, the universal characteristics of phenomenal existence, namely Lakkhana Samoha, delusion about characteristics. And the light, that is the light of penetrating insight, the right understanding by penetrating the characteristics. So today we shall continue this subject. By deeply connecting with the every arising object and be with the moment, have every mind and body which arises. As much as we do that, it will be manifested in your mind, the nature of the mind and body. You don't have to think about it purposely. If you continue to practice this mindfulness, you are bound to see the causal mode, the cause and effect of mind-body. All mind-body are subject to their cause and effect, and this conditionality will become obvious in the mind. And with the continued practice, exerting your energy, you are bound to see and will become obvious, as much as you are able to connect with the object, the impermanent nature of the object. The impermanent nature, unsatisfactory nature, and the impersonal nature of the object. These characteristics will become obvious in your mind. and you don't have to purposely look for it. So in this way, you begin this initial or this insight knowledge, and with the continued practice, with the exertion of energy, as much as you do that, and as your mindfulness is anchored on the object of observation, the mind will not go anywhere. Instead, it will become concentrated, giving rise to Kanika Samadhi, and this Kanika Samadhi, momentary concentration, will arise continuously in a very unique manner. As much as it does, then you are bound to progress through the levels of insight knowledge. At this moment, you will come to see the characteristic of arising and passing away, and their unsatisfactoriness, and their impersonality. So, as is given in this Vipassana, the meaning of Vipassana, variety of characteristics, or unique characteristics, and Passana, seeing. You are seeing the variety of unique characteristics in terms of impermanence and so on, until you are able to reach the maturity of insight knowledge. Once you become fulfilled with the insight knowledge, then with the signaling of the path consciousness as an intervening consciousness, you are bound to see the cessation of or extinction of mind-body. So, in order to reach that stage, the final stage, you got to connect with every arising object in the beginning, continuously. This is the only responsibility of the yogis. Then, with the deepening of concentration and the cultivation of knowledge, the concentration of knowledge are bound to arise as a result of your continued practice. And this kind of knowledge is not from conceptual one, this is your experiential one, arising from personal experience. So while you are noting every arising object, these things are bound to result. So all you have to do is just to practice respectfully and carefully with faith and confidence. Then the immediate result or the result will be Lakkhana Prativeda Samadhi, the right view by penetrating the characteristics. So today we shall discuss this the characteristic, how the mind opens to the characteristic of impermanence of the mind and body. Once one is convinced about the nature of impermanence, one will also become convinced of the remaining two characteristics, namely the unsatisfactoriness and the impersonality. They will arise automatically, and you become convinced with these characteristics. Let us explain these three things, namely Anicca, Anicca Lakkhana, and Anicca Nupassana. As for this Anicca, impermanence, all you have to understand as a whole is the whole body is Anicca. Every arising mind and body, Namarupa, is Anicca. Rising of the abdomen is Anicca. Falling of the abdomen is Anicca. Sitting, touching are Anicca. Bending, stretching, lifting, moving, placing, all these things are Anicca. So are these senses of seeing, hearing, tasting, touching, thinking, they are all Anicca. Every mind body, every Namarupa in the body are Anicca. The reason is, as is given in this expression, Kayatina, because everything goes to cessation, goes towards cessation, or everything is ceasing, everything is extinguishing, everything is extinguished, everything is disappearing. That means they come to voidness. So all mind, body, Namarupa in the body is Anicca. So when any one of mind and body arises in the body, none of them is stationary, none of them is permanent. Everything ceases. Everything goes towards cessation. Everything disappears. Therefore, we say they are anicca. They are not permanent, they are impermanent. It was explained yesterday the various characteristics. Out of these characteristics, we spoke about the sabhava lakkhana, and all sabhava lakkhana are anicca. Because they are individual characteristics, they are individual things, specific things, and unique things. They are sabhava, they are anicca. Because they are not mixed with other things. They are just outstanding in their own, or in its own individuality, specificity, uniqueness. Hence called sabhava, and they are anicca, not mixed with other things. So one has to remember that they are all anicca. Let's put it down to practice. When you're sitting, watching the abdomen, every time one breathes in and out, rising and falling of the abdomen is bound to take place, bound to be very obvious. In fact, although we say rising and falling, this is common usage, we are experiencing its nature, or their nature. The nature of rising is stiffness, tension, movement, inflation. These are the nature of the vayu, wind, the wind element, or vayu puddhaba rupa, because it can be experienced. The materiality of the tangible element of the wind. This can be experienced directly. Hence it is known as Paramattha, the ultimate reality. So too with the falling, while one is observing as falling, actually falling, the nature of falling is relaxation, calmness, deflation. This also is vayu puddhaba rupa, the materiality of the tangible element of the wind. Like when the wind is blowing outside, we can observe, sometimes it's windy, sometimes it's not so windy, sometimes it is calm, sometimes it's just a breeze and so on. So too in the body, we have these wind elements, the manifestation of these wind elements. As we breathe in and out, the wind goes in and out, or the air goes in and out, causing rising and falling to take place. There's an inflation during rising. That is, the wind is blowing hard. And when after rising the falling takes place, there's a deflating. The wind is going out, or calmness. So this way, just like the outside wind is blowing very strongly, or in a weak way, or in a calm way, so too the wind elements are working in the body as rising and falling. So when rising takes place, what we observe experientially is the stiffness, tension, inflation, and as the moment of falling, we observe this movement and deflation. So in the abdomen you experience this directly, this rising and falling, and actually the ultimate realities, namely stiffness, tension, movement, inflation. All these things are sabhava, individual, unique characteristics. They are all anicca. Because at the moment of rising, these elements or sensations, stiffness, tension, and so on, they arise and pass away. Each arises and disappears. Each comes and goes. each passes away. Same thing with falling. When falling takes place, the deflation, the movement, relaxation, each of these sensations also arises and passes away. Other objects are the same thing with other objects like heat, cold. All these sensations will come and go, will appear and disappear. They are never stable for even one short moment. So if the question is asked, is it permanent? Then one may answer it is impermanent. But that kind of answer may be from the theoretical aspect, which can be right or wrong, or which may be right or wrong. In the case of the Buddha also, when he gave the first sermon, the Dhammacakkappavattana, the wheel of the law, at that moment, there were these group of five monks were listening, and one by one they attained Sorapatimega, became Sorapana, one by one day after another. Prior to their attainment, the Buddha has not used these characteristics of mind and body, that is anicca, dukkha, anatta of mind and body as yet. Only they are asked to note whatever arises, only to note, to discern mind and body and their causal mode. Only when they are fulfilled with these insight, knowledge, they attain this first consciousness. So then the Buddha started using these terms such as anicca, dukkha, anatta of mind, body. So the yogis also have practiced more than 40 days. So now they have experienced in their own right. That's why this discourse is given at this stage. Because the Buddha himself has asked whether the mind-body is permanent or impermanent, and the group of five monks were able to answer after they have attained the first path consciousness, that the mind-body are impermanent. So only when they have attained the first path, that is observing these objects in the nature of kayatena, that they are getting exhausted, they're disappearing, passing away, disappearing. After they have known this disappearing nature, passing nature of the objects, let us say in the body are these stiffness, tension, movement, and the Buddha asked whether they are permanent or impermanent. Then the answer was impermanent, because they pass away. They cease to exist. They disappear. And when they are asked whether these sensations such as heat, cold, warmth are permanent or impermanent, the answer was impermanent, because this was experienced through practice. And whether the softness, hardness, these sensations, are they also permanent or impermanent, the answer again was the same as the previous one, impermanence. And how about the cohesion, solidity, flowing, these are they permanent or impermanent? They are the same answer. And also how about seeing, hearing, tasting, touching, all are these sensations, are these senses permanent or impermanent? The same answer. And the feelings, sensations, same thing goes with these feelings and sensations. So the answer given was from their own experience, because they are able to activate their mindfulness, connecting every object deeply, sustaining their mindfulness, and then were able to deepen the concentration. With the Khanika Samadhi, they are able to cultivate insight knowledge. First, they observed this mind and body in a very coarse manner. Then the conditionality, the process of cause and effect of this mind body. And up to this stage, they are not knowing, or they have not known the passing away of objects. Only when they continue their practice of mindfulness, they are able to see the impermanent nature of this mind and body, that they are anicca. So they are able to answer these Buddha's question from their direct experience. The same thing with the yogis. Now, after they have practiced for so long, they have observed through their experiential knowledge and their own right. Hence, this discourse in accordance with the Buddha's discourse of the first sermon. The Adhagata, the commentaries have given this expression, Thodava abhavato, something which has not existed in the beginning, disappears or passes away. Hence, the name Anicca. Now, when you are watching the abdomen and noting rising and observing the sensations, stiffness, tension, inflation, which are all anicca, they arise. They arise. Previously, they didn't exist. Initially, they were not there. Only when you breathe in, that is Hodva. Only when before you breathe in, it has not existed. Only when you breathe in, it comes into existence. Hence, it is called arising or arisen, and then it passes away or disappears. Disappearing or passing away is abhavato. Abhavato. It disappears, it dissolves, it passes away. So this arising and passing away, coming and going, appearing and disappearing. Appearing, and then afterwards it disappears. To be more obvious, the commentaries have explained. Of course, Buddha has also explained already that when one passes away, one must have arisen. One must arise first before it passes away. It arises, things arise and pass away. So it is more obvious. Let us say when we are watching the abdomen and noting rising. Now, rising has not existed or did not exist in the beginning. Previously, rising did not exist. Only when you breathe in, it comes into existence. That is arising or coming or appearing. Later, it disappears, passes away. So this rising and passing away nature is that what is named as anicca. And during rising, the stiffness, tension, movement are sabhava lakkhana, the individual unique characteristics. And because of this arising and passing in nature, the nature of coming and going, it is anicca. So are other objects as they arise. Now comes the anicca lakkhana, the second one. It is given as Hodva abhavataro. Hodva, what has not existed in the beginning or initially, has the characteristic of disappearing or passing away. This is the mark or characteristic of passing away, knowing as a mark of passing away or a characteristic of passing away. Let us say when rising takes place, from beginning to end, first of all, that we have this stiffness, tension, movement, inflation. All these things are nature, impermanent things. When you focus your attention on this rising, on these sensations, first of all, rising takes place. Beginning, you notice the beginning of rising. This is appearing. Then it comes to an end. Disappears. This is arising and passing away, appearing and disappearing. This is known as akara, or manner, or mark. This is not the real individual characteristic. This is just a manner, akara, not the sabhava lakkhana. The beginning of rising appears, then it disappears. In this manner, one observes the mark of impermanence. This is Anicca Lakkhana. So, when this stiffness, tension, movement takes place, they all pass away. They arise and pass away. One sees the mark or the characteristic or the manner of arising and passing away. This is Anicca Lakkhana, or knowing the Anicca Lakkhana, the characteristic or the mark of impermanence. When falling takes place also, from the beginning to, as you observe from the beginning to the end, you see this mark or characteristic or the manner. So whatever arises in the body, there are this manner or characteristic or mark of arising and passing away, appearing and disappearing. And this mark or manner or characteristic of impermanence is known as Anicca Lakkhana. At this point, one may get confused between the two expressions, sabhava and akara. Now, asabhava, as already discussed, individual unique characteristic. It can be experienced directly, and on that, depending on this individual characteristic, there arises the manner or the characteristic. Namely, the manner, let us call it manner, otherwise it may be confusing. The akara arises depending on sabhava. Let us say in the darkness, lightning takes place. Now lightning itself is sabhava. This is individual, the unique one, individual thing, unique thing. Let us not use characteristic. It is unique thing and individual thing, or specific thing. It has not existed in the beginning. Initially it did not exist. It only arises and passes away in a flash of a moment. So lightning is anicca because it did not exist before. It has not existed initially, hodva, but later it passes away. It arises and passes away. It comes and goes. So this coming and going is the manner of coming and going. This is manner akara. The lightning itself is the sabhava. And coming and going, rising and passing away, appearing and disappearing is the akara. So, as for lightning, the lightning itself again is sabhava, and the coming and going is the akara. Same thing with the stiffness, tension, movement in the abdomen, rising, and when rising takes place. These are sabhava, the unique things, individual things. Specific things, they are anicca. Whereas when they arise, when they come and go, when they arise and pass away, this is akara. You see the beginning and the end. This is akara or Anicca Lakkhana. Akara is Anicca Lakkhana. Now lightning is not the characteristic. Lightning is not the mark. But the mark depends on the lightning. The mark of coming and going. The mark of appearing and disappearing depends on lightning. They are separate. So lightning again is the unique thing, the individual thing, and the appearing and disappearing of the lightning is the akara, is the Anicca Lakkhana. Same thing goes with the heavy arising object in the body. These arising objects itself, the mind and body, are sabhava lakkhana. These are individual, unique things. And the manner of appearing and disappearing, the manner of arising and passing away is Anicca Lakkhana. When rising and falling takes place, noting as they arise fresh, as soon as they arise, immediately rises. As you note, this stiffness, tension, movement during rising. This is vaya potapa. This is a tangible element of the wind at the moment of their arising or their happening. Deeply connecting these objects, you begin to observe the beginning of rising. You observe the beginning of rising. Now rising itself, or stiffness, tension, movement themselves are sabhava, the unique things. And the beginning of this rising is the manner. Then you observe that it arises, and you observe the beginning of this rising, upada, arises, and then you observe the ending of this rising. It goes away, it disappears, and you observe under the last moment. This is known as vaya. You observe the dissolution. Dissolution about what? Dissolution about the stiffness, tension, movement, which are sabhava. In this way, you observe sabhava, the unique thing, as well as the beginning of the arising and the ending of the objects, the dissolution of the objects. You observe the beginning of the object and the ending of the objects, arising of the object and passing away of the object. In this way, observing this arising and passing away, in respect of the sabhava, that is stiffness, tension and movement, while you are noting it, you at once become convinced of the impermanent nature of these objects. That is Anupasana. With repeated noting of rising and falling, while you are deeply connecting with the objects, you understand or you become convinced of the impermanent nature of the objects. Anicca, when you combine anicca, impermanence, and Anupasana, contemplating or repeated noting, it becomes Anicca Nupasana, and knowing this is Anicca Nupasana Jnana, knowledge of the contemplation of impermanence. Become convinced of the arising and passing away of these objects, that after all you come to a conclusion that these things are impermanent. Knowing the beginning of this sabhava, one knows only where it starts and where it ends. This is Anicca Nupasana Jnana, knowledge of the contemplation of impermanence. In fact, one is not knowing the details as yet. One is only knowing roughly. For instance, when one is noting rising, one observes the beginning of rising and then it ends. It's a long rising all throughout. This is known as santati, meaning continuity. Things of the same nature are moving, like stiffness, tension, all these things are moving continuously. They are of the same nature. Because they are continuous, it is known as santati. Moving continuously or flowing like a current. This, when it happens at that very moment, at the presently, is known as santati pajupanna. Things of the same nature are moving continuously, presently, immediately. Now in the beginning of the insight knowledge, one sees only the things of the nature moving. One observes only the beginning of that continuity and then the end of that continuity only, but not yet the middle of that in detail. So let us say when one is putting on this switch, the electric light, when you put on, the light comes, and then when you turn off, the light goes. But in the middle, there are these flow of electricity coming and going. You don't notice, you think it's one continuous thing. The light is going on continuously because things of the same nature are moving continuously. In this case, electricity coming and going. Actually, this is what theoretically you know. Of course, there's electrons moving and passing away, coming and going, coming, appearing and disappearing. which gives light. But you think it's continuous because they are flowing continuously. So actually, in fact, there are many coming and going of these electrons in the case of the light, and then the coming and going of the objects in one rising or falling or any other objects. So too with the rising takes place continuously with the continuity of the things of the same nature, and yogi only observes the beginning of the rising and the end of the rising, but not quite the middle details, the minute microscopic details which occur in between. Just like this electricity flowing in between the switching on and off. So in this way one knows only the beginning and the end of these things of the same nature moving, but not yet the microscopic details of the middle part. Let us say when we light a candle, there's the wick of the candle, and the candle which itself is a fuel, and you light, and the light comes on, then it continues to light or to light. But when the wick as well as the candle, the fuel itself are exhausted, they disappear, then the light goes off. So you notice the beginning of the light and the end of the light, or the going of the light. That is what most people understand, or what is most obvious what is obvious to most people, the beginning of the light and the end of the light. But not quite the minute details which occur in between the arising and passing away, many arising and passing away of minute things. They only are aware of the light, beginning of the light and the end of the light, because the knowledge is not microscopic, not yet. They are not able to know things in detail. So to one observes the beginning of the object and the end of the object. At this stage, this much of one's insight knowledge, because one has not reached the maturity of that knowledge. Only this much. This happens at the beginning of insight knowledge. Later, with the continued practice, as the mindfulness and concentration becomes very strong, and at that moment, you can just follow. You can follow them without too much effort, without extra effort, because you have reached the maturity of the practice. As the noting mind is concurrent with the object of observation, and as you are able to anchor your noting mind on the object, activating mindfulness, as the mindfulness is very strong, as much as it is activated, sustained, the mind will not go anywhere, deepening the concentration, stilling the mind, unification of the mind rises. And at that moment, the noting mind is very close to the object, more and more closer and closer to the object, deepening the concentration. So as one notes the rising at this time, one observes not just the continuity of rising, but one can observe the middle parts, the middle part of that rising, sometimes in segments, 3 segments, 4 segments, may be seen by some yogis. At this stage, the noting mind is very close to the object to be noted, and the objects also, the segments also become very prominent, very obvious, and properly observed. This is a stage of what is known as Udiyavya Jnana, observing the fast arising and passing away of objects. At the next stage of insight knowledge, Paṇḍitā Sayadaw, knowledge of dissolution, one not only sees, one will not see beginning and the middle, but one sees only the end part, that is dissolving part of the objects. One will be seeing only the dissolution of the objects at this knowledge of dissolution, Paṇḍitā Sayadaw. So at this stage, the noting mind is very close, considerably close to the object, and the insight knowledge also becomes very sharp. That's why at this stage, with the power of concentration, the vision becomes very sharp, very penetrating, and very sharp and very strong, seeing the middle, the arising and passing away of the segments in the middle part of the objects, seeing especially at the stage of Paṇḍitā Sayadaw, dissolution of the objects. At the beginning of the insight knowledge also, saddha can arise to some extent, but not so powerful. As one is noting deeply the rising and observing these sensations, stiffness, tension, movement, which are the vaya prodhava, the tangible element of the wind. With the practice of satipatthana, one observes this arising and one is convinced of this arising and passing away by one's own personal experience. So, in this way, observation of the impermanent nature of the object, penetrating into it, penetrating into the truth, opening to knowledge, then one comes to acceptance that things are impermanent. All mind, body are impermanent. That is correct. There is acceptance and resolution, leading to saddheya saddha, resolute faith. This can arise only from one's own personal experience. Only from one's own personal experience one will come to acceptance. If one has not seen that, one has not observed by one's own experience, then one will not be accepting this truth of impermanence. And these two things, the saddha and paññā, they arise in pairs. Paññā in the front, and the acceptance of saddha comes afterwards, later. Then becomes very unshakable faith. So, when one understands the impermanent nature of the object as one notes at the moment of arising, then as one understands the present impermanent nature, one will also conclude that in the past also this mind-body must have been impermanent, and this is quite correct. And also in future also, this mind-body will also come and go, not permanent. So once one sees the beginning and the end and rising and passing away objects, one will be able to deduce that they are also correct. They will be true also in the past and as well as in the future. And as much as it occurs in oneself, one can conclude through deduction that it also happened in others. This is Anumana Jnana, inferential knowledge. And this Anumana Jnana, inferential knowledge, can only arise based on one's own direct experience, Paccekka Jnana. Only when one experiences directly Paccekka Jnana will one be able to know this inferentially, Anumana Jnana, about the past and the future, and as much as it is true in oneself, it would be true in others. So in brief, when one notes rising and observes the stiffness, tension, movement, at the moment of this dissolution, of the rising and passing away, one knows this is anicca. This in itself is anicca, impermanence. And knowing this is knowing the characteristic of impermanence And in this way, the knowledge of this impermanent nature is Anicca Vipassana Jnana, knowledge of the contemplation of impermanence. And hence, at this stage, one cultivates Vipassana Jnana. At this stage, Vipassana is the nature of impermanence, or impermanent characteristic at this stage, and Passana, knowing or seeing. So Vipassana, seeing the impermanent nature of these objects. This is the beginning of insight knowledge. That's all for today. That's all for today. That's all for today. That's all for today.